Early this year, Alison Armstrong was hired as Toledo's new fire chief. This was notable not only because she's likely an asset to the city due to her strong background in health, but because she's the first female fire chief in Toledo's 158-year history. Exact numbers are difficult to come by, but most reputable sources estimate that only somewhere between 4 and 7% of professional firefighters are women. Alison Armstrong's appointment is even more impressive given this figure. Here at Rocket Talk, we thought this achievement provided a great springboard to discuss the state of gender and leadership in our world today. Here to discuss are Dr. Sharon Barnes, Chair of the Women and Gender Studies Department at UT, and Dr. Renee Heberle, Professor in Political Science. Welcome to you both. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So I thought we should start this conversation with a little bit of context about gender and leadership. Currently, I'm going to go to the paper here to make sure I get this right, but only 8% of CEOs of Fortune 500 companies are women. Only 24% of U.S. senators are women. And of the country's 100 largest cities, only 30 of them have women serving as mayors. And when you contrast that with the fact that 57% of bachelor's degrees and 59% of master's degrees are awarded to women, it seems that maybe we're improving and providing equitable educational opportunities for women, but those haven't necessarily translated to leadership. Can you just unpack for us a little bit about what you think is happening when you hear those figures?
Well, I'll jump in here. I think that we need to disaggregate what we mean by leadership. There's different areas where different kind of leadership is called for example. But the other way in which we can do this is disaggregate the sites in which we want to think about gender dynamics and who is in charge, so to speak, who has power, who has influence. And if we look at it really take the screen back a little bit and look at questions about power and influence, we can see from some of your statistics and others that in the context of wealth, certainly males are still predominantly the wealthiest of the population. If we look at politics, we rank about 21st in the context of the numbers of women in politics. We have about 13% of all political positions, electoral positions, are held by women in the United States, which is really, very low in comparison to other similar nation states. In athletics, we see that males still sort of predominate. Women's athletics have had a hard time sort of breaking the barrier and getting on the national radar. And in war making, we can look at that as a kind of male area. On the other hand, I was looking at this article called "The End of Men," written in 2020 in the Atlantic Journal, in the Atlantic Monthly. And this article kind of argues that the economy, in a sense, is coming to women. That it's not just, there's been extraordinary fights against discrimination and extraordinary fights for access. But on the other hand, if you think about the service and information economy in which we live, it's kind of coming for women, to women, as opposed to women having to fight to enter because of the differential skill sets. So for example, the information and service economy is more attuned to skills socially cultivated among girls and women. And thinking and communicating over physical strength and stamina, which we ordinarily associate with a more masculine kind of figure.
And given kind of what you're saying there, it makes me wonder, are these problems, if what you're saying is correct and we're heading in that trajectory, are we going to self-correct some of these problems?
That's a very interesting question, and I am not one that is going to place my bets on sort of social and historical evolutionary tendencies. I think that we need to really pay attention, and we need to think about how we want to work to have a more equal basis in the context of these positions of wealth and politics and war making and these other kinds of areas.
Yeah, I think really what I would add to this is really just that I think how we define leadership has traditionally been pretty favored in terms of qualities that we also mostly associate with masculinity. So we were talking earlier about how even women who tend to succeed in, say, the political realm tend to model themselves on the traits that we typically associate with masculinity, assertiveness, those kinds of qualities. So my hope is that when we move forward into the future, we're more well-rounded in terms of what we think about leadership means. So maybe we value listening, something that we would typically associate with femininity, and kind of some of the things that Dr. Heberle was saying, that we open up those positions to qualities that all humans, of course, possess anyway.
Sure, and when you're thinking about kind of reconceptualizing what leadership looks like, and privileging some of those other kind of qualities, it makes me wonder. I mean, it still does seem important, I guess, that we find ways to kind of have diverse and equitable opportunities for people in those more traditional kind of roles. But what are some of the barriers that women might face in those kind of positions that men may not?
Well, if I could go first here, I would say I think that the presumption of qualities that we associate with biological sex or gender that are really maybe not accurate to the qualities that people really have. So women have a tendency to have to prove that they can be logical or something. I mean, hopefully nobody still thinks that today, but I think those, a big barrier for women is a presumption of, incompetence in certain areas that we need in leadership, even though that's, of course, totally stereotypical. So stereotypes, for one, a big barrier.
I'm going to get a little bit more concrete and say childcare.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because leadership is often associated with the consistency of your presence in an organization, in a setting where you can prove yourself on a consistent basis. Women are still the primary caregivers, and childcare is simply inaccessible. It just is. And so professional, good quality childcare is simply inaccessible to the vast majority of women. Sure. I can give you numbers later if you want to hear them, but I would say that has an enormous impact on whether or not women make it to senior attorneys in law firms, whether they make it to the coaching position in athletics, head coaching position in athletics, whether they make it into in running for office, for example. I mean, some of the barriers are being knocked down in terms of running for office, and the ways in which, but I don't know if it's progress that Tammy Duckworth is bringing her baby to the Senate floor for votes. I mean, it certainly breaks down a barrier, but it also sort of signifies the added burden on women, that she's the one bringing her baby onto the floor to breastfeed, as opposed to the man having to be the one with the baby on the floor. Do you see what I mean?
Oh, there's a lot of complicated threads there to untangle, for sure, yeah. Well, and I think, you do mention, I love the kind of concrete approach to that. I think it's really interesting. But you also mentioned breaking a barrier there. And I wonder about, these kind of opportunities like we're seeing, like with Alison Armstrong being appointed here, breaking a barrier that's, hasn't been broken in the city of Toledo before. Do you think there's anything particular about, this barrier being broken? I see you shaking your head.
Yeah,
What do you,
I
like you're ready to get in there?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Did you want to?
No, go ahead.
The image of the firefighter as the protector is a very masculinist image. The kind of physical work, the 24/7 commitment of it, the dangerousness of it, all of those are very much associated with masculinity and a masculinist kind of figure. So protection can go both ways in terms of gender. We think of women as, lifting cars up to get their babies out, to save their babies. But we also think of the male in the more publicly protective role. So firefighting is a publicly protective role. It's not a privately protective role. And so you're out saving other people's lives. It's not the maternal instinct saving your child's life. It's you're out saving other people's lives. And I think that image of the firefighter, given the stereotypes that Dr. Barnes was talking about, also informs why we have such a lower number of women, in addition to the very concrete circumstances of the 24/7 eating and sleeping together, the kind of, masculine bonding that happens at the firehouse and those kinds of issues as well.
I think every time we break a barrier, we need to celebrate. So I think in that case, it's worth celebrating her achievement. And I think she spoke very eloquently about wanting to be a role model for other girls who are interested in that. So I think that's to be celebrated.
And we're running out of time here, but kind of before we go, like just talk about a little bit about the ways in which obviously we need to find these opportunities because it's the right thing to do, but also how do providing these opportunities benefit all of us, whether you're a woman or not?
I could say just really quickly that we know in our education work that when we design universal access, right, which our colleagues in disability studies have taught us so much about, everybody benefits from making something accessible. And so in the sense that it's great to have diverse representation everywhere we go, it's a benefit to all of us to have women firefighters or women in any field that they've traditionally had.
That's great, and I think it's such a great note to end on. I appreciate it. So, and I really want to thank you both for being here. It's great to hear from you. And I want to thank everyone out there for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Rocket Talk.